Welcome to Door County Stories. In each episode of this series, we'll hear the stories of various Door County residents, all told in their own words.
Some may be familiar, or you may be encountering them for the first time, but they all make up the vast mosaic of people who live in our community and help make Door County such a unique and interesting place to live.
All of the people you'll meet in this series have their own distinctive and individual stories to tell.
In each episode, after our introduction, their voice is the only voice you will hear. In this episode, we'll be speaking with Peter Ciesla. I first met Peter when I was writing articles for the Peninsula Pulse a few years ago. I was told to talk to an artist couple with a studio in Bailey's Harbor. There I met Peter and Sky and was floored by the beauty of their wearable artwork, as well as by Peter's incredible backstory. When we started this series, I knew that Peter needed to be one of our first subjects. Without further ado, this is our interview with Peter from March.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for choosing me to participate in your series. It's nice to say something about myself to the community. So, yes, I live in Door County and have moved here with my partner, wife Sky, 19 years ago from Chicago area. And originally I'm from Poland, came to United States in 1991. I'm an artist, so that's what I do professionally. I work with fiber. I'm a textile artist and a designer. I create some textiles and then usually put them in form of wearable art. In form of clothing. There were many years during the time I was doing what I'm doing, where I primarily designed and made jewelry, and it was all embroidery, so it's considered also a fiber art. So that's what I do, and here in Door County, I also own a gallery that it's a textile and wearable art gallery called Basili Studio here in Bailey's Harbor. It's going to be our 7th year this year in existence. Besides that, I'm an avid gardener. I love gardening. Anything that grows in my garden is welcomed. Also, Door County offers us so many wonderful places to enjoy, so I really enjoy the nature of the place. It's quite spectacular. Yes, I was born in Wrocław, a city called Wrocław in Poland, in 1961, and had a really nice childhood, living between the city and a lot of my relatives. My parents, brothers, sisters lived outside the city in the countryside. Some of them had farms. So I also spent a lot of time enjoying that and enjoying quite a bit, enjoying nature, I would sometimes leave for days, well, one day at a time, and just be on my own. As a small child, I don't think that any parent would support that these days, but I did quite a lot. It was a very inspiring thing for me, and as I see it now, it really influenced a lot what I do and my outlook on the world and on life. I spent as a child quite a bit of time enjoying the arts, not as an artist, but just seeing and experiencing things. My parents loved going to theater and opera, and it was not unusual to take with a child. So I remember as a little kid, I would see these amazing performances of the Wrocław Opera, and then some theater, and it was a city that was full of art, a lot of artists that I somehow met eventually. I spent a lot of time in my life around them, but that was my childhood. So between enjoying and experiencing the life of nature, spending a lot of time outside the city, and then being exposed to a lot of art because of my parents, that really shaped, I think, what I was doing. I never really had an idea about, at this time as a child, of what I would want to be doing with my life, but an opportunity came up. My mother had a sewing machine that apparently I don't remember her ever using it, but she had a sewing machine, and she subscribed to a Burda magazine, which is a German magazine that I think it was like a quarterly, and each issue had several patterns in it. And in one of those issues, there was a men's shirt, a pattern for a men's shirt, and I thought, well, that can't be too hard. I should be able to do it. So I made this shirt. I was 11 years old when I did this, and it came out terrible. It didn't fit, and I had a hard time putting it on and taking it off. But something happened, and I had to figure out how to do it right. And I loved the textile. I loved the fact that you can do something with just a sheet of fabric, that it's two-dimensional, and you can do something that it's like a sculpture, three-dimensional, but at the same time it's very functional also. So I had to figure out how to do it right, and I guess I'm still figuring it out, but it's this kind of a passion that was developed lasted for my whole life. I never thought about this as a child. I guess we really process certain things when you get a little bit older, but I was born 16 years after the Second World War ended. 16 years. As a child, I always thought about the war as something that happened way, way, way in the past, but apparently I was living surrounded with people who were just deeply, deeply scarred by the experience of the war, because they experienced it personally. And also my family, I'm from Poland, although I am not Polish. I belong to a small ethnic group called Lemkis that used to live in a southeast, a part of Poland. And what happened to them in 1947, 2 years after the Second World War, all of the Lemkis were resettled by force and moved to the western part of Poland, which actually Poland just acquired. There was a lot of land divided and borders changed after the war. So it was German before. And so there is this really life-changing, terrible experience that my family went through. They were moved to the West, and they were moved to a place that actually, as I learned later, also went through this just terrible, terrible time after the war when the Germans were losing, and they basically had to evacuate the city within days, and it was winter. So it was quite horrifying thing that happened. So moving from my parents and their families being forcibly moved to moving to a place where people were also moved by force from, I'm sure that left some mark on my life. So that's my circumstances. And being a minority in Poland, that actually was the reason why I decided to leave Poland later on. And I moved to Germany. I'm actually a refugee. I'm actually a political refugee from Poland. Poland was still a communist country when I left. And I was granted an asylum in the United States. I had to wait through the whole process in Germany. That's how I ended up living in Germany for 3 years. It was actually, interestingly enough, 3 years up to a day, exactly 3 days from the moment I arrived to the moment I left. So, and arrived in the United States in 1991 in Chicago area. My sister lived there, still does, and I lived with her for starters. And that's how my story in the United States started. I needed to make a decision what I was going to do. And because I always felt that I have something to say as an artist, that's what I decided to do, and somehow got myself into doing what I'm doing. And it has been a really nice, wonderful stretch since 1991 to now of creating things and growing within what I'm doing. Well, in Germany, because of my status in Germany, I was really taken care of by the government, and these were the rules, and I wasn't really allowed to do pretty much anything but just wait for my process of immigration to go through. And by the way, it was not certain by any means from the starters throughout the whole process if actually I will be able to move to the United States. So it was a very uncertain time this way. But I had a lot of time on my hands, and I was creating one of the first things I did when I ended up in Germany. I bought in a flea market a little sewing machine and some, I don't know, some sheets or something, old sheets to make some things out of. I couldn't just always feel like I have to be making something. So that's what happened. And at some point, a friend of mine, we met on the street while walking, and she said, oh, you know, somebody I know, she was in a restaurant business, and somebody I know, something happened and she lost half of her crew in a restaurant, and she needs somebody who would just help with anything, you know, over a weekend until she finds the people that she needs. Would you help? And I said, sure. I mean, I didn't really have anything planned to do, so I said, sure, no problem, I'll help. And so I worked in this restaurant for 3 days first, and doing pretty much anything, from just helping in the kitchen to washing dishes to straightening up tables. They were kind of desperate at this point. So whatever needed to be done, I would help with. And I do have some clue about cooking. I always liked cooking a lot. I don't have any education relating to that. I never studied it on any level, but I do enjoy it and know some things about it. So after these few days of help, I was asked if I would actually stay working in this restaurant and become a sous chef, a help to the chef. Apparently, he liked how we worked together, and he saw something that would be working and helpful for him. And I stayed there, and I worked there for quite a while. It happened to be a restaurant it was a restaurant and a hotel. Small, very small. It was right near Speyer in Germany. And I became a sous chef. And what I was going to say is that this restaurant and a hotel also had a gallery. So it was a gallery restaurant, and two of these aspects were worked together. It was a restaurant that created exhibits of art, and they would create menus that would complement the artwork. And it was such a fascinating context, and it was very creative. So that was the fun part about the restaurant, and that's how I worked as a sous chef. I never picked up that type of job again after I left Germany, but it was a really, really interesting, enjoyable time. Well, I wanted to go to United States for a long time, and I have to tell you also that having a reason to be an immigrant and leave Poland and go somewhere else. There was one part of the whole reasoning. I was also very curious about the world, and you could not really travel a lot during communist time. You could go to some of the Eastern European countries, and so I was very curious about the world. I chose United States mainly because my sister lived here. She still does, and she was there before I was started the immigration process. So that was kind of a practical issue. I had somebody that would help me, for starters, in the country. But United States, it's one of those places where I don't know if there are too many people in the world that are not curious about. It's just such a big, interesting place. There's so much diversity in this country. So it's just a very, very, very a place that draws your attention. I always thought, not knowing what any place outside Europe is like, I always thought that I watched a lot of movies, so we all did, and I always thought that United States is going to be like Europe, but like 10 times more and better, which was a funny thing, but which is not. It's just a completely different place. It has a little bit different history, and of course the history connects with Europe, but it has its own strong history that you really learn what the country is about when you start learning about the history of this country. So, although it was not disappointing, it was just something that, there was just so much to learn. So how could it be disappointing after coming here? One of the first things that hit me, actually the first thing that hit me after I landed at O'Hare in Chicago, actually, the first thing was when I arrived at night. So the plane was getting close to the city, and it was going over the Lake of Michigan, and then over downtown Chicago, right north of downtown. And the sight was absolutely spectacular. I think I was just smiling because I have never seen something like this. And even if you see it in a movie, that's a very different experience. And plane landed, my sister picked me up, and the first impression was everything was big. Everything was big. Cars were big. Streets were wide. There was so much space everywhere. So that was my first impression. Of course, I got used to it very fast, and took time to explore the country. I didn't speak English when I came to the United States, and having an experience of living in Germany for 3 years and not also knowing the language when I arrived there, and learning the language not in a formal way, but just kind of picking it up to be able to communicate. And I communicated comfortably, but my German was far from being what they would call a Hochdeutsch, a good, correct language. So having that experience, I understood that if I will in any way accomplish something and succeed in any way, I really have to focus on the language first. So I immediately was directed, my sister helped me a lot in all this process, was directed to a national Lewis University that had a wonderful program. It was an English as a second language. So I went to college to study the language on a college level, and this was probably the best thing I could have done. So that was my first step. I didn't work for the first few months. I was just kind of getting accustomed and starting learning language. And I don't remember exactly, but it was maybe 3-4 months after I arrived, I found a job. And so I worked. I actually worked for a designer in Chicago area, clothing designer. It was a custom clothing design shop. It was in Glencoe at this time. Now it was moved to Chicago. But so that was my work. That's what I was doing. This is what I knew how to do. And I knew already that I wanted to go into direction of working with fiber. Well, speak Polish, of course. I can't say I speak German because I haven't used it for so long now, and I was recently in the presence of a few people from Germany, and I could understand a lot what they were saying, but I would have a very hard time having a conversation right now in German language. I speak Lemke, not very good, but I do speak the language of my ancestors, and in English. So these are, I also studied Russian in school. It was mandatory during communist time in Poland, but I never tried to really use it for many years. So I can assume that it would be the same story as with German. When I worked for this designer in Chicago, I was trying to figure out how am I going to move forward into doing what I wanted to do, what I'm doing now. And of course, the field was very new for me. But at some point, I realized the place where I worked was not good for me. And I decided to let it go. And opportunity came up. I do have a nursing degree from Poland. That's an interesting thing because I never really worked as a nurse, but I did finish nursing school. And the job opportunity was working for a family in Chicago area, taking care of an elderly gentleman. And I decided to take the job. So I had some clue about nursing. I'm not certified in the United States, so I could not take a nursing position anywhere. But this was a job that just required somebody to be always present around this gentleman and helping him with everything. He was like 6 years after stroke. And so I took the job and still dreaming and trying to figure out how I'm going to wiggle my way into being an artist, working with fiber. And this position lasted for about a year. But when I worked there, I met my wife, Sky, through a mutual friend. Sky, it's also an artist. At this time, she was a stone carver. And she created this small sculpture. And a part of the sculpture was a figure of I always thought a Native American woman healer and earth medicine woman. That's actually the title of this sculpture. And she wanted this little statue carved in black marble to have element of costume. So mutual friend of ours, she knew that that's what I strive to do, and she connected to us. So I designed and made this little costume for the little statue. That's how we met. And I guess the rest of history, we are still together after so many years, doing well. So Sky was already an established artist. So in a way, I had everything, all information or knowledge about how to approach and what my choices are right there in front of me. So she was really the person who guided me how to get myself into doing what I wanted to do. So after the position working for this family, taking care of the older men ended, I started my own business, and I started designing some clothing for some people in the area. Actually, just working for this couple was very helpful because I met a lot of people who became actually my customers after that ended. And so that's really how I started. And few years, maybe couple years after I started my own business, I met someone who also was living in a town where I lived, where I worked, who became like a very important person in my life, became like a mentor type of a character who really guided me into the whole business of clothing design and working with textiles and working with certain type of client. And it was a person who had her wardrobe designed for her for most of her life. And she was a performer for a while in her life, just this wonderful, beautiful human being. And she figured out how to make me feel confident and how to deal with certain things. So I was very, very fortunate to be found by somebody like that. And that's really started snowballing at this point. And my clothing design business was doing fine. And then eventually I designed a few pieces of jewelry, and a year later started doing shows and trunk shows with the jewelry. Eventually, Sky joined me in the effort of designing and making jewelry, and we both worked on it for a long time and traveled with it all over the country with trunk shows and showing in stores and in galleries. So that's kind of really basically my way into how I got myself into doing what I was and am doing. I think that's the short version of the story. Yeah, I certainly see a change. I think that some changes that I see are really connected to the fact that I am changing, and living in Door County definitely changed me, and it changed me, I would like to believe, in a very positive way. And but as far as goes about just visual changes, I mean, it definitely got what it seems more populated. There are more people here than there used to be. It seems like we have way more visitors during the season and even off season that we had than we had when we moved here. Bailey's Harbor, as you might know, it's called the quiet side. I mean, this side of a peninsula. Although it's not that anymore in the summer. Sometimes it's hard to find parking. So that's really the change that it's happening. You know, that's good for a lot of people who want to create, you know, businesses, and it can all probably work together. You know, more businesses open, more opportunities for people to enjoy, more people come. It also somehow, I noticed that Door County got younger, although I got older, so maybe it's still the same. I see an influx, quite an influx of younger. When I say younger, I mean people that are somewhere 30, 35, 40 years old. So that's different. Well, pandemic, yeah, it hit us all hard, and it created a lot of trouble for a lot of people. I think I feel quite fortunate because with all the uncertainty that followed the arrival of COVID-19, somehow also an opportunity for a change came. So it really took a lot of, usually it takes a lot of trust in something, whatever you choose to trust in, as when you want to make a change, because changes are very hard, and especially when you have all aspects of your life somehow figured out and rolling certain way and working certain way. So it's very, very hard to just stop and change things. It's actually almost impossible. So COVID-19 presented itself as that was not even an opportunity, and I really hate to call it this way because it's created a lot of havoc, and tragedy for a lot of people. But it was something that happened, and everything stopped. So in a way, allowed me personally to make a decision about some changes that that I wanted to implement, thinking about it over the last several years, and I never could figure out a way how to. So everything just came to stop, and I was able to do the changes. I think I was. I still don't know exactly the outcome, but the changes really connected to wanted to travel for business less, move around less, wanted to slow down with the working with stores and the galleries. I really enjoyed it for a long time, but it just seems like I needed to really focus on some other things I wanted to do. So in that way, and I hear it from many people that allowed people to kind of just stand still and think, about what to do. And of course, I feel very fortunate because somehow we were able to figure out how to, losing our house. I mean, people are going through really awful situations. So somehow, let's say, universe was very kind to us, in this way. So I was able to. I feel like I had this opportunity to. I was very lucky to be in a situation where I was able to somehow utilize this tragedy that is happening around the world to maybe help myself somehow. No, I didn't. Actually, I have to say that, I design clothing, but I'm not really a fashion designer. I was somewhat a little bit here and there participated in that world, but I never was fashion designer. I think I was calling myself a fashion designer for a while because I thought it was a sexy thing to do, and I kind of mingled with that a little bit. But I am not really, and I never really was. I'm really consider myself a textile artist who who works with fiber to create three-dimensional forms that we can wear and we can express ourselves with. And of course, jewelry, that's another thing. So I think that being, working with a lot of retail outlets, many that I worked with and still work with some now, that was much more forcing me to adjust what I would want to do into fitting needs of people. So our business really came to stop when the COVID-19 kind of really happened in the United States in mid-March last year. And as I mentioned, we own this small gallery here in Door County, Wearable Art Gallery, and I just really focused on creating things that I feel people would enjoy seeing and wearing. And a lot of these items are not necessarily items that are designed to fit a certain way of dressing. It's a lot of individually designed pieces. So there was a lot of freedom this year into designing things. So of course there's a thought what's going to happen and how we will change the way we dress. And I think this COVID-19 had a big influence on the whole fashion industry because there's much more pressure than there to accommodate that. It really didn't affect me that way. That's funny because a few years ago I had a conversation with my son, and I don't know, he was struggling with something, with some decisions, and I shared some of my wisdom acquired through my years here on the planet, and his response was, "You older people, you think you know everything." So I think that's not an unusual story. This happens all the time, and so that actually made me realize that. When you are at a certain age, when you are a younger person, it's kind of your right, and that's what you do in your life. You don't really pay attention a lot. You're just focused on what's happening in your head, and you have your own understanding on everything. And I think there's more tendency to feel about being right about things. So that's where this came from. So when you ask me, what would I, oops, excuse me. When you ask me, what would I do? What would I say to myself as a younger person? That's what popped in my head. I don't know if there is anything I could say that would really, really matter. However, if my life would depend on it, meaning me as a younger person, I think I would definitely say to be, and this might sound like a cliche, but it's really not. That's just what it is. To be as honest as you possibly can with yourself and anybody else, and just always be considerate and kind, no matter what. That, I think, would be the advice that I would give. I think that's the most important thing, and everything falls into place when you do that. Well, collaborative process. It's such an interesting thing because when you're an artist, a creator, and anybody really can be an artist. I mean, you can do anything. You can be a plumber. To be a good plumber, you need to be an artist. You can be a lawyer or a doctor. In order to be that, you really have to be an artist. You have to somehow be able to apply your creativity to what you do. So when you get into a collaborative process, I think it's what could be the hardest thing It's when you have an idea about something and a thought, and if it's not going to be exactly the way you imagine it and you think about it, it's not going to be right. So how do you invite somebody else to your creative process? Okay, that I think can create a lot of problem. However, when you open yourself up, and there was a point in my life when I understood that what I do, it's really not about me. When you get to this point, this is when you can really enter a world of amazing collaboration with other people, because you pay attention to somebody, and you are not looking to do something that you want to do. You are looking to achieve a certain goal, and having another person participating in it, it becomes a real plus. It's a very positive thing. So that doesn't mean that it's easy. We could not do what we have done together if we would not have separate studio spaces. It just would not happen. You know, Sky has her own space, workspace, and that's her, place that I don't, interfere with, and vice versa with me. And then you just talk, and you figure out differences, and you try to understand somebody else's point, and compromise on this ego base that has to be my way. So altogether, it's a great experience. And we have created some great things, I think, working together. Things that probably we couldn't, I don't know, have done on our own. I think actually one of the most amazing one of the first amazing experience was meeting a person I mentioned earlier who became a mentor to me. And I was allowed to enter a world I never thought I would. I was allowed to work with textiles, materials that I never even imagined existed, because I never had access to it before. And I suddenly had a lot of freedom to make decisions about for people, make decisions for people, about which was a lot of responsibility, and it was kind of hard to do at the beginning, but I actually ended up liking it a lot. So that was amazing experience. I learned so much about people and so much about the business of what I was doing. And it kind of really opened up. I learned how to value my work. That was probably, at this point, actually, I know it was one of the most important things, because I was always afraid of seeking compensation for my work. I was always very awkward about it, and I think a lot of us are awkward around that. And it was really helped me with being confident about seeing the value of what I do and somehow putting a number on it and asking for it. The second amazing experience, the person who I was just going back a little bit, I was just talking about, she passed away several years ago, so this relationship ended. But there is another person that I met, and I still do some design work, for actually quite a bit of design work for her. And it was an amazing story. Sometimes just the way things happen. When I designed clothing for people, I was frequently visiting fabric stores in Chicago area. So everybody knew me there because I was constantly there looking for something. And one day, somebody came in, went to Vogue Fabrics in Evanston, and she just asked the salespeople, she said, I have some fabrics, I would like somebody help me to do something with them. Do you know anybody? And they gave her my cards, my business card. And here I meet Edie, a person who just came back from India, lived there for several years, had purchased these amazing textiles, hand woven especially for her, and saris. And she completely doesn't know me. I completely doesn't know her. And we meet, and she shows me the fabrics, and she says, can we do something with this? And me learning what these textiles were, I was like, are you serious? You really want me to put scissors to these fabrics? You don't know who I am and you don't know what I can do. And she said, you'll do fine. So, and this experience is still continuing. This is 26 or 8 years later. And it's just this amazing relationship with the customer who has complete trust in what you do. And at the same time, I have complete trust in her response to it. Because, you know, it is collaboration, actually, when you work with somebody like that. So over the last 20 some years, I don't think that there was a one day that I didn't have some project working for her. I think I have like a whole handful of 20 pieces that I work on for her. And it has been spectacular. It's I am designing and putting together things that I really wouldn't be able to otherwise because of the types of textiles, or even I don't work a lot with a lot of people who have that kind of lifestyle. So these are great. These are the two greatest experiences as far as goes about working with clients. I hope that answers your question. You know, I do have to say something. It just came to my mind. You know, being an artist, it's a very interesting field because a lot of people don't take it seriously. And it's very often by many people, consciously or subconsciously, perceived as something frivolous we do, you know, artist, you know. You're an artist, you know, it's like you didn't get a real job, you became an artist. You know? But it is a very serious and responsible profession, you know. So I think I would like people to know that I see myself as somebody who's doing something of value, and it's doing something that contributes to something more than just myself. And I find being an artist, you know, I mean, you work like everybody else, you know. It's okay, I'm in my studio all day, but I have to be, you know, I have to organize my time, I have to work a lot, I have to figure out how to make a living. It's like everybody else, you know. So for some reason, art, being an artist, it's often seen as something not serious, but it is as serious as any other profession is. So I think I would like people to know that that's how I feel. Well, thank you very much for having me, and I'm honored to be chosen to be interviewed. And Door County, it's just such a special place, and it's full of these amazing artists who just really do something beautiful and important. It's that's why people love coming here. Besides the nature, it's all the artists that create wonderful, very actually diverse that way artistically community. So I'm very fortunate to be here, and thank you for inviting me.